Ferrari hits Lewis Hamilton with a €2 million penalty. Curious about the reason? Don't miss this video. It's made for you. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. The Formula One landscape has been utterly destabilized following the stunning emergence of a secret audio recording, revealing a violent, emotionally charged confrontation between Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc, an altercation so ferocious and revealing that it prompted Ferrari's executive leadership to impose an unprecedented internal sanction of €2 million upon Hamilton. The sheer gravity of this development transcends mere disciplinary action. It's a symbolic explosion inside a team long recognized for internal strife, clashing egos, and its near-religious reverence for tradition. What transpired behind the guarded walls of Ferrari's hospitality complex during the emotionally charged weekend in Japan has now erupted into public consciousness like a detonation in slow motion, sending tremors across the paddock and far beyond. On the surface, it had seemed like business as usual. Polished driver appearances, orchestrated sponsor photo shoots, measured press responses, smiles for the cameras, data sheets in hand, headphones on, and strides of confidence through the Suzuka paddock. But under that glossy exterior festered weeks, possibly months, of accumulating strain. What the cameras didn't see were the cold shoulders, the misaligned telemetry reviews, the rehearsed professionalism slowly being eroded by suppressed rage and mounting disillusionment. Tensions had been escalating beneath the surface, ignited by conflicting development ideologies, a carousel of questionable strategic decisions, and an ever-growing undercurrent of personal friction. Those embedded within Ferrari's inner circle had sensed the mounting instability. Hamilton, despite his public restraint, had reportedly grown disillusioned with what he privately referred to as operational paralysis, a chronic inability within Ferrari's engineering chain of command to make timely, bold decisions. His attempts to inject urgency, propose bold aerodynamic shifts, and implement dynamic energy harvesting protocols were consistently met with bureaucratic inertia. Meanwhile, Leclerc, once the golden child of the Scuderia, felt increasingly sidelined and overshadowed. In his view, the soul of Ferrari was being diluted, reshaped into something unrecognizable, an unspoken accusation that the team was slowly morphing into a cold German-engineered facsimile of its past under Hamilton's influence. Personal boundaries began to dissolve. Hamilton and Leclerc, once mutually respectful, stopped communicating outside mandated settings. Joint debriefings were reduced to sterile exchanges. Their arrival times at the circuit were deliberately staggered. Meal times were scheduled apart. A relationship once based on cautious camaraderie had corroded into competitive frostiness, with both drivers maneuvering within a team environment that had devolved into silent factionalism. It was no longer two drivers chasing the same goal. It was two rivals locked in a cold war within enemy territory disguised as a unified garage. Then came the spark that set it ablaze. Eyewitnesses have now revealed the harrowing details of that Saturday evening behind closed doors. In a tense engineering review meant to discuss braking irregularities and balance discrepancies, the discussion turned bitterly personal. Leclerc, already frustrated by what he considered unwelcome override of his input, erupted. The volume rose. The words sharpened. What began as technical analysis became a verbal assault. "You walk around like you're untouchable," Leclerc snapped, his voice raw with fury. "You interrupt the staff, you disregard the sim results, you treat everyone like your subordinates. This is Ferrari. You're not bigger than this crest." He wasn't done. 7 championships? Maybe it was never your talent. Maybe it was always the car that carried you. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. The room froze. Engineers exchanged stunned glances. Data specialists instinctively leaned back in their chairs. Hamilton, by all accounts, remained motionless, silent, yet visibly boiling. His response was measured, surgical. He rose from his chair with the deliberate calm of a storm about to hit land and uttered 3 chilling words. "Say that again." Leclerc, holding his ground, whether out of pride or misjudged confidence, repeated the accusation, near verbatim. And that's when the dam broke. Hamilton stepped forward and shoved Leclerc with such force that the Monégasque hit the wall hard enough to rattle nearby shelving. What followed was a singular brutal punch, a clenched fist driven by months of silent resentment and wounded pride, striking Leclerc just beneath the left eye. The impact reportedly caused an immediate welt, perhaps even a mild fracture. The sound, those present say, was visceral, a slap of flesh and bone amplified by the acoustics of a confined room. For a heartbeat, time stopped. An analyst tried to intervene, only to be blocked by Hamilton's own race engineer, who restrained him instinctively, perhaps to protect both Hamilton and the situation from deteriorating even further. Leclerc, dazed and stunned more by the betrayal than the force, slumped slightly, clutching his face. The room became a vacuum. No one spoke. No one moved. Everyone, from logistics coordinators to strategy directors, stood in stunned paralysis, the gravity of what they had just witnessed sinking in with a weight that felt permanent. What followed was an emergency containment operation. Senior team officials, caught entirely off guard, held late-night damage assessments. Legal counsels were summoned from Maranello. Crisis communication strategies were drafted. An effort was made to treat the event as an unfortunate emotional flare-up, a mere misunderstanding under pressure. But everything changed once the audio escaped containment. The leak is still under forensic investigation. Some whisper that it came from a disgruntled junior staff member seeking retribution. Others suspect it was an unintended upload to a shared device. Regardless of its source, the recording's authenticity has been verified. You can hear the rising tension, the exact moment Hamilton's voice changes, and the sickening sound of impact that leaves nothing to the imagination. Ferrari's hands were tied. Less than 2 days later, they issued the largest internal fine in the team's modern history, €2 million. The wording was precise: unacceptable conduct and violation of professional standards. Hamilton's entourage responded with indignation, accusing Ferrari of hypocrisy, pointing to years of internal disputes swept under the rug between past drivers. There is now growing talk that Hamilton's legal team is scouring the contract for clauses related to provocation, mitigation, and liability. Leclerc has vanished from public view. No statements. No social media activity. His close circle has gone silent. One confidant, speaking off record, said simply, "Charles feels betrayed. This wasn't just a punch. It was a message." Ferrari has tried to paint the incident as an internal matter being resolved with discretion, but insiders claim the atmosphere within the factory is now one of paranoia and fear. Staff are being monitored. Meetings are now segmented. The camaraderie is gone. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. Sponsors are alarmed. Major partners have demanded urgent briefings. Shell is said to be evaluating brand alignment metrics. Puma has paused its upcoming Ferrari campaign pending review. Santander has reportedly ordered an independent audit of its brand association strategy. And at the FIA, sources suggest that a discreet yet comprehensive investigation is underway. While formal disciplinary action remains uncertain, the incident has already set a new precedent for how serious off-track conduct can affect sporting governance. What was meant to be a historic pairing of experience and youth, legacy and ambition, has spiraled into scandal. The team's internal equilibrium has collapsed. Hamilton's image has been dented. Leclerc's aura of calm precision now appears fragile. Ferrari, instead of battling Red Bull on the track, is battling itself behind the scenes. And the wider paddock is watching closely, not with schadenfreude, but with a chilling sense of what happens when power structures implode under the weight of ego, silence, and betrayal. This is no longer just about a punch thrown in anger. This is about a dynasty at war with itself, and two of the sport's most iconic names standing on opposite sides of a line that may never be erased. The paddock didn't sleep that night. The glow of mobile screens lit up hotel lobbies across the city as engineers, mechanics, journalists, and fans alike devoured every new piece of unverified information that trickled into the digital bloodstream of the sport. Screenshots, voice memos, fragments of blurry security footage, none of it confirmed, all of it viral. The 47-second audio clip had detonated like a grenade at the heart of Formula One's most iconic team, and the silence from Maranello only deepened the wound. Theories metastasized. Had there been contact? Who escalated it first? Why had it reached this point? Every frame of old footage between Hamilton and Leclerc was now being rewatched with new suspicion. Smiles scrutinized for insincerity, casual glances interpreted as smoldering disdain. Meanwhile, inside Ferrari's inner sanctum, the atmosphere was at its most volatile in decades. What had begun as a moment of explosive confrontation had now become a full-blown institutional crisis. Internal communications were temporarily frozen. A full-scale audit of the team's internal security protocol was launched overnight. Staff with even minor access to the hospitality unit were being questioned. IT teams worked feverishly to determine whether the leaked audio had come from an internal phone or an external breach. The audio's authenticity was never in question. The voices were unmistakable. But what unsettled leadership most wasn't the fact that it existed. It was the timing, the precision, the way it had been released. Someone had planned it. Frederick Vasseur had barely slept. He hadn't needed to. His mind was too active, racing faster than any car in the garage. Every decision he made now wasn't just about two drivers. It was about the future of the Scuderia itself. There were whispers of internal factions forming. Junior staff were aligning behind Leclerc, some believing that he had long been treated as a second-class citizen despite being the face of the team. Others, particularly those recruited during the Hamilton transition, stood firmly by Lewis, citing his professionalism, his history, his experience. What had once been an ambitious dual leadership experiment was becoming a fragile political standoff. The very culture of Ferrari was at risk. Inside their separate accommodations, both secluded, both secured, Hamilton and Leclerc spent the night in stark contrast. Leclerc, raw with fury and humiliation, reportedly paced for hours, replaying the incident in his head until the details blurred. He made no contact with anyone apart from his brother, who flew in that night to be with him. He refused food, declined all attempts at communication from team liaisons, and even turned off his phone. He did not want spin. He wanted honesty. And he wanted accountability. Whether from Hamilton, from the team, or from the universe, it wasn't clear. Hamilton's night was quieter, but no less intense. Sources close to his circle described him as internally fractured but externally composed. He went for a walk alone shortly before sunrise, staying away from the cameras that had already begun to camp outside his hotel. When asked later why he didn't fly home, why he chose to stay through the media storm, his answer would be simple: you don't abandon the fire you helped ignite. But at that moment, he wasn't thinking about PR. He was grappling with something he hadn't felt in years: shame. Not for what was said, but for letting himself be dragged into a storm that he knew could destroy everything he had spent decades building. Back at the track the next morning, the Ferrari garage resembled a bunker under siege. Teams moved like ghosts, voices hushed, glances stolen. Every team meeting, every strategic discussion, was layered with tension so thick you could feel it in your bones. Leclerc arrived through a separate entrance. No cameras captured it. No team member greeted him with the usual casual ciao. Hamilton, who arrived shortly after, was similarly cloaked in avoidance. Neither man made eye contact as they passed each other in the paddock. They didn't need to. The frost in the air did all the talking. Vasseur called them in for a joint meeting. Not disciplinary. Not strategic. Just the three of them, locked in a room with soundproof walls and no reporters to distort the truth. According to one team member with indirect knowledge of the conversation, Vasseur's tone was surgical. Calm. Controlled. Deadly serious. "This isn't just about you two," he reportedly said. "It's about the 1,200 people who rely on you to represent them every weekend. If you cannot function together, this team will fracture from the inside out." Leclerc didn't speak for the first 5 minutes. He stared down at the floor. Hamilton, arms folded, leaned against the wall, visibly coiled. When Leclerc finally raised his head, he looked directly at Lewis and said, "This isn't about me being number one or you being the legend. This is about trust. And you broke it." Hamilton didn't deny it. He didn't deflect. He didn't offer one of his well-polished philosophical replies. What he did say stunned Vasseur into silence. "I didn't come here to fight you. I came here to build something. But maybe I underestimated what was already broken before I arrived." The room held its breath. That conversation didn't solve everything, but it carved a crack in the wall between them. A small splintered opening through which, eventually, something resembling respect might grow again. But not now. Not today. Today they had to race. The crowd that weekend was the largest in recent memory. Tickets had sold out in hours after the audio leaked. Fans wanted blood. They wanted answers. But more than anything, they wanted tension. And they got it. During the formation lap, Hamilton and Leclerc lined up side by side, red cars, black helmets, thousands of miles of history between them, and not a single handshake exchanged since the incident. The camera lingered on their cars. Broadcasters leaned into the drama. Commentators dropped subtle lines like, you can cut the atmosphere with a knife. And when the lights went out, neither of them held back. The ramifications were deeper than anyone could have anticipated. What began as a highly charged on-track moment had metastasized into a spiraling organizational crisis that threatened to rip apart the very fabric of Ferrari from the inside out. As footage of the altercation between Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc ricocheted across the globe at warp speed, the repercussions infiltrated every layer of the team's operations, from its marketing apparatus to its technical command structure, creating a storm of such ferocity that not even the most seasoned Formula One veterans could recall a precedent. Within the executive boardrooms of Ferrari's most prominent commercial partners, chaos took hold. Executives, legal advisors, and brand managers convened in emergency sessions, dialing into late-night video conferences with Maranello to demand clarity, assurances, and in some cases, immediate action. This wasn't a case of minor damage control. These were global companies with billions invested in polished brand identities. Companies that could not afford even the faintest whiff of alignment with instability, aggression, or internal disorder. What they saw on screen was not just a heated exchange, it was a breach of image contracts, a betrayal of core values, and a public relations ticking time bomb. High-level sponsorship agreements, some inked over champagne toasts in Monaco penthouses, others rooted in decades-long mutual trust, were now being scrutinized clause by clause. There were murmurs of exit clauses being discussed behind closed doors. One top-tier sponsor, known for its pristine image and presence in the luxury goods sector, was reportedly considering halting its Ferrari activation campaign entirely if a formal apology and disciplinary framework weren't immediately established. Ferrari's commercial division, once lauded as one of the most stable and enviable in all of motorsports, now found itself under siege, fielding back-to-back conference calls with increasingly agitated partners who wanted answers, damage assessments, and strategies to pivot public perception. The media landscape, naturally, transformed into a battleground of narratives. Television studios scrambled to rework feature stories, podcast episodes multiplied in hours, and newspapers ran special Sunday editions devoted exclusively to the unraveling saga in red. Public discourse wasn't just engaged, it was ravenous. The comment sections of major sports outlets flooded with polarized reactions. Some fans, fiercely loyal to Hamilton, defended his demeanor and portrayed the situation as the culmination of months of internal provocation, subtle slights, and unchecked tension. Others, equally loyal to Leclerc, denounced the incident as a moral collapse from a driver who should be setting an example, not igniting conflict. Analysts compared it to infamous moments from F1 history, the Prost-Senna wars, the Rosberg-Hamilton implosion at Mercedes, even the infamous turbos versus naturally aspirated split of the 80s. But this was different. This was Ferrari. And that changed everything. Digital platforms exploded with obsessive scrutiny. Frame-by-frame video analyses flooded YouTube and TikTok. Some users went so far as to reverse engineer audio from team radio comms, trying to detect underlying tension in tone, pauses, or inflection. Reddit theories became labyrinthine, citing obscure interviews, body language in pre-season testing, and obscure telemetry data to support theories about a long-simmering power struggle. Fan factions, normally content with harmless rivalry, became ideologically entrenched, turning each social post into an argument battlefield. Even previously neutral fans began choosing sides, each convinced they were seeing the truth through the haze of spin and deflection. Amidst the public uproar, Charles Leclerc's silence spoke louder than any statement could. His absence from Media Day in Miami sent shockwaves through the press corps. It was unprecedented for a Ferrari driver to skip such obligations unless medically unfit, and there had been no report of injury. When asked, the team merely stated he was unavailable, fueling further speculation that his relationship with the team was deteriorating beyond repair. Journalists resorted to tracking his physical movements within the paddock using camera crews, attempting to catch even a glance or reaction. Every eye was trained on the body language between him and Hamilton, or the glaring lack thereof. The way they avoided each other's gaze. The absence of shared celebrations or even civil gestures. It was as though the two operated in parallel dimensions, unable and unwilling to acknowledge each other. Privately, sources within the team began leaking troubling accounts. Requests had been made to rearrange the team's meeting structure entirely. Physical dividers had been installed in debrief rooms. Shared engineering briefings were shortened or split into individual sessions. Communication protocols had been modified so that messages could be filtered through intermediaries, ensuring that the drivers wouldn't even need to speak unless absolutely unavoidable. One mechanic described the atmosphere as colder than an alpine wind tunnel. Others whispered about a divide so entrenched that it wasn't just professional, it was personal. And then came the revelation that no one was ready for. This wasn't the first fracture. A private conversation held weeks earlier during the Bahrain Grand Prix had evidently set the stage for the entire unraveling. In the post-race cool-down zone, tensions reportedly flared when Leclerc confronted Hamilton over subtle but strategic chassis requests made during Friday's technical debriefs. According to a highly placed source, Leclerc snapped, "You're reshaping this car into a Mercedes clone." Hamilton's reply, according to the same source, was chillingly calm, "I'm shaping it into something that wins." That exchange, while never publicized, had altered the dynamic permanently. From that moment onward, trust was dead. What remained was pure calculation. Inside Ferrari's racing department, the chain of command began to fracture. Engineers found themselves making difficult choices: align with Leclerc's legacy and emotional intensity, or with Hamilton's proven championship pedigree and relentless demand for optimization. Teams began creating invisible walls, setting up private data feeds, avoiding eye contact, and holding whisper room strategy sessions. The once singular Ferrari machine now pulsed with dissonance. A lead aerodynamicist reportedly asked for a sabbatical, citing exhaustion and internal toxicity. Other key personnel began reaching out to rival teams quietly, testing the waters in case an escape became necessary. The racing strategy itself suffered. Conflicting instructions during previous races had already hinted at discord. Tire compound choices, pit stop priority, and even race start procedures had begun reflecting a lack of unified philosophy. Ferrari, a team that once operated like a precision symphony, now felt like a jazz band with no conductor, everyone improvising, no one harmonizing. From the outside, other teams were watching with a mix of horror and schadenfreude. Off-the-record quotes started leaking to journalists from rival paddocks. One senior strategist at Aston Martin reportedly told a confidant, "Ferrari's not just burning, they're exploding from within." A Red Bull technical analyst was overheard saying, "We could run our car on their tension. It's more combustible than fuel." Even former drivers chimed in during TV panels, with one legendary champion declaring, "This isn't a rivalry. It's a civil war under a single roof." Toto Wolff's reaction, though characteristically reserved, sent chills through the paddock. When asked about the situation, he said simply, "It was always going to end like this. They're not teammates, they're competing ideologies." That one sentence encapsulated everything: the clashing visions of what Formula One greatness should be. Leclerc, the passionate prodigy with unfinished business, desperate to carry Ferrari back to glory through emotional intensity and raw speed. Hamilton, the titan of modern F1, calculating, strategic, cool under pressure, and unwilling to compromise on standards forged through years of relentless excellence. As the circus of Formula One descended on Miami, arguably the most glamorous, scrutinized, and chaotic venue on the calendar, the air crackled with anticipation. Every press conference was a minefield. Every garage glance a provocation. Every delay in answering a question was interpreted as confirmation of the deepening rift. No one could look away. The drama had transcended sport. It had become myth. Two gladiators, each dragging behind them the hopes of millions, now locked in a psychological and mechanical arms race that showed no signs of de-escalating. No matter what results came on Sunday, the headlines had already been written. This wasn't just about championship points. This was about pride, legacy, ego, and the very soul of Ferrari. And in that unforgiving crucible, the world would soon learn which vision, if any, could survive. The atmosphere within the world of Formula One has rarely felt so charged, so combustible, so utterly unpredictable. As the tension between Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc continues to intensify, the boundaries between professional rivalry and personal discord are beginning to disintegrate. What started as subtle friction has now evolved into an emotional battlefield that threatens to engulf not just Ferrari, but potentially the entire championship narrative. And while Ferrari remains outwardly composed, insisting that everything is under control, those closest to the team whisper of a storm brewing just beneath the surface, one that no PR strategy can contain, one that no apology can diffuse. Within the paddock, words like incident, conflict, and escalation are being used cautiously, almost fearfully, as if naming the beast will make it real. Yet behind closed doors, engineers, strategists, and even logistics staff are walking on eggshells. Eye contact is avoided. Conversations are muted. Every action is now calculated, every silence filled with implication. Team meetings, once collaborative, now feel like war councils. Decisions that once took minutes now stretch into hours as team principals scramble to avoid missteps that could trigger further implosions. Nothing is simple anymore. Even a tire compound choice for either driver is being weighed not just for its performance benefit, but for its potential to be interpreted as favoritism. Meanwhile, the FIA, long known for its procedural pace, is now moving with quiet urgency. Though no formal announcement has been made, sources close to senior officials confirm that a discreet yet thorough assessment of the entire situation is already in progress. This isn't just about rules. This is about optics, about precedent, about the invisible line between competitive passion and personal hostility. The governing body is acutely aware that their handling of this conflict may define how future disputes are managed. Should they discover anything that even remotely suggests a compromise to sporting integrity, be it verbal threats, internal sabotage, or the undermining of safety standards, their intervention will be swift and unyielding. Already, a special advisory group has been assembled, tasked with collecting testimony, reviewing private footage, and gauging the psychological impact on team members. Officially, it's monitoring. In reality, it's surveillance cloaked in diplomacy. And then, of course, there's the matter of psychological stability, a topic rarely addressed publicly in the cutthroat world of elite motorsport. Yet, within Ferrari's inner circle, mental health has now become a frontline concern. Without confirming it outright, insiders have acknowledged that both drivers have been quietly offered access to psychological professionals, trained to manage high-performance individuals during moments of acute stress. The move is as much about damage control as it is about care. Ferrari knows what's at stake. They're not just managing race strategy, they're managing two egos, two reputations, two entirely different worldviews that now share the same garage but not the same universe. Hamilton, often seen as the calm within chaos, has retreated from his usual off-track engagements. No more late-night interviews, no more fashion events, no more carefully choreographed media appearances. He's pulled the shutters down and gone inward. Even his closest confidants describe him as being in a different place mentally. Not angry, not sad, but deeply focused. He's been seen arriving at the track earlier than ever, often hours before any scheduled commitment. Not to socialize, not to perform, but to prepare. And not just in the simulator, but in one-on-one sessions with race engineers, poring over telemetry with an almost surgical intensity, searching for any micro-advantage he can weaponize on race day. It's not about winning anymore. It's about control, dominance, redemption. Leclerc, on the other hand, has become visibly more tense. His body language in interviews is rigid, his answers clipped, his demeanor distant. To those who know him best, the transformation is chilling. Gone is the smiling prodigy of Ferrari's future. In his place stands a man burdened by the weight of a perceived betrayal, struggling to reconcile his loyalty to the team with his growing frustration over its unraveling. He doesn't need to say it aloud. The look in his eyes says everything. He feels invaded, challenged, and worst of all, replaced. And while he continues to perform on track, the emotional toll is mounting. Every qualifying lap, every post-race debrief, every glance toward the other side of the garage feels like a silent war being fought behind the eyes. And the division doesn't stop with the drivers. Within the team, the ripple effects are devastating. Crew members who once functioned as a single organism now operate like two separate entities forced into awkward coexistence. Engineers whisper among themselves. Pit crew members now show subtle but visible preferences. Information, once freely shared, is now carefully guarded. It's no longer Ferrari, it's Hamilton's corner and Leclerc's corner, separated by little more than a painted line on the floor and an ocean of resentment in the air. The sponsors are starting to murmur. Executives from major partners have flown in, not to watch a race, but to observe the internal climate for themselves. There's concern, not just about branding, but about association. Ferrari has always been synonymous with excellence, elegance, heritage. But chaos? Infighting? Psychological warfare? That's not part of the marketing package. Behind the scenes, conversations are taking place about exit clauses, renegotiations, and media strategy. A single on-track collision between the two could turn a volatile situation into a global spectacle of failure. And Liberty Media, the commercial stewards of the sport, are watching everything with both fear and fascination. On one hand, This feud is a ratings dream. Conflict sells, and this is conflict at its most dramatic. But on the other, they know that unchecked destruction could stain the narrative they've spent years crafting. They want drama, not disaster. Rivalry, not ruin. But the line is razor-thin, and no one knows when or how it might snap. The fanbase, too, has split down the middle like a fault line opening beneath the surface. Social media is ablaze. Every comment section, every podcast, every race day forum is a digital battlefield. Hashtags supporting one driver or condemning the other trend within minutes. Videos dissecting gestures, analyzing team radio tone, or decoding cryptic Instagram posts rack up millions of views. Fans are invested, deeply and emotionally, because this isn't just sport anymore. It's theater. It's war. It's the unraveling of a dream team before our very eyes, and nobody can look away. The paddock has never felt heavier. Every upcoming session feels like it could be the match that lights the inferno. A qualifying lap where one driver deliberately refuses to tow the other. A slow pit stop that might not be accidental. A poorly timed undercut that feels too calculated. The tiniest decisions now echo with significance, because every interaction is loaded with suspicion and consequence. And as the season barrels forward with no sign of cooling, the question gripping every paddock insider, every team principal, every analyst, and every fan glued to their screen remains the same. Not whether Ferrari will win. Not whether either driver will take the title. That dream has slipped into the background. The only question that matters now, the only one that fills the paddock with dread and fascination in equal measure, is brutally simple.